So let's begin. I'm so pleased that Chosters is hosting tonight's event featuring Santa Barbara's own Bonnie Marcus. And her latest book, Not Done Yet, How Women Over 50 Regain Their Confidence and Claim Their Workplace Power. Bonnie has filled many roles in her life: single working mom, teacher, aerobics instructor, like Warblers and all, award-winning entrepreneur, Forbes contributing writer, and executive coach. She has over 2 decades of management experience in startups as well as Fortune 500 companies. She's been honored by global gurus as one of the world's top coaches of this past decade. Her first book was The Politics of Promotion: How High-Achieving Women Get Ahead and Stay Ahead. Welcome, Bonnie.
Thanks, Michael. It's great to be here.
Joining Bonnie this evening, I am pleased to introduce Dr. Lois Frankel, a New York Times bestselling author, executive coach, and an internationally sought-after keynote speaker in the fields of career and leadership development for women. She is perhaps best known for writing the classic business Bible for women, Nice Girls Don't Get the Corner Office. Lois has been a guest on Larry King Live, the Tavis Smiley Show, in 2020 to discuss her best-selling books, and has been featured in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, USA Today, and Time Magazine, among many other numerous publications. So please welcome Dr. Lois Frankel.
Thank you, Michael. That was a nice introduction. And hi, Bonnie.
Hi, Lois. How are you?
I'm good. Congratulations on the publication of your book.
Thank you.
I know that I've read it, and there's lots of stuff I like about it, and we're going to be talking about all kinds of things in here. You know, when you first told me you were writing the book, I thought it was such a great idea because as you and I have talked about before, this whole notion of women and aging, it's not something that's discussed often. I mean, between our best friends, you know, sometimes we talk about it, but the whole thing about reclaiming your power is often not discussed. So I'm so glad you wrote this book, and I think people are going to get a lot out of it. And I suggest they give it as a gift to every woman they know over 50. Let me start by asking you this question. Today was the release of the book. I had thought it was a little bit earlier, but today was the release. And I know it coincides with Women's History Month and International Women's Day. What made you decide to put it out now?
Well, you know, it was a strategic move to do that. This year's theme for International Women's Day is Choose to Challenge. And in Choose to Challenge, that means own your thoughts and your actions, and to call out what you see in terms of gender bias and inequity, right? And of course, the book is about gender bias. It's about the combination of gender bias and ageism, and about giving women a voice to call it out. And Women's History Month, along with International Women's Day, both honor and acknowledge the stories and the achievements of women. And so I find that resonates so well also with the theme of the book, where I call on women to really honor their journey, honor their talent, and their wisdom and the lessons that they've learned. So those two together were kind of a perfect starting point.
Well, when you were writing the book, talking about this whole notion of women honoring, right, their journey, their past and their future, and this whole notion of choose to challenge, you know, it's been interesting because people have asked me to talk on that topic because that's the theme this year. Yeah. And I choose to look at it a little differently than other people, which is choose to challenge yourself. And I think in this book, this is what you're doing. You're getting people to choose to challenge themselves. I mean, I particularly like the chapter on power. And if you're not feeling very powerful, you got to take a look at how you're giving it away, right?
Yes.
Which I really love. So as you were writing the book and people were talking about their journeys, Did you find women hesitant to talk about that, or they were open about it, or everywhere in between? What was your experience?
Well, it was such a different experience than when I wrote The Politics of Promotion. So when I started to do research for that book, I sent out inquiries and I said I was looking to interview women who had experiences with office politics. And would they come forward and tell their stories? And Lois, it was like the floodgates opened. Everybody wanted to talk about how they were, passed over and political animals, and they were so emotional about it. So I figured I'd do the same thing with this book. I'd put out inquiries on all my social channels and say, I'm writing a book about women over 50 in the workplace, gendered ageism. Would you share your story? Would you be willing to share your story? And it was like crickets. There were so few people who responded. And those who did, with the exception of yourself, because your story is included in the book,
Yes, it is.
wanted to be anonymous.
Oh, that's
And I thought that was a really important point, because there is a lot of shame around women reaching a certain age in the workplace. And I say, Lois, I say it's similar to the way it was before the Me Too movement. And women were afraid to really call out their abusers, to really talk about sexual abuse or harassment in the workplace. They didn't have a safe environment to do that. And I find that when it comes to gendered ageism, it's very similar. Women don't want to come out of the shadows. They don't want to admit that they're a certain age. They're trying to do their best to navigate from the sidelines, which, to the point of the book, doesn't really work.
That's interesting because, when I wrote Ageist Women, Timeless Wisdom, I had the exact same experience, that I just wanted to talk to women about, and it was nowhere near, didn't have the depth of your book. I just wanted to write a fun book about the lessons women learned in their lives. And I went to nursing homes, and I went to, all, retirement homes. Every person I looked at that I thought could fit my category, I talked to. And I was really surprised the number of women that said, I don't really have anything to add. And my question was very simple. In all of your years of living, what's the one thing you learned to be true? And crickets is a good way to describe it, right? So I think you kind of explained why you wrote this book. You really wrote it because you wanted people to come out of the shadows?
Well, it all started probably 4 years ago. I was coaching a 58-year-old female attorney who worked for a large tech firm in Silicon Valley. And she was on their legal team. She had been there for 8 years, and she was a star. But now she was the oldest. And she found that now people weren't asking her for her opinion anymore. She was left out of key meetings.
She was marginalized.
I'm sorry, what?
She was being marginalized.
Yeah. And her workload started to be redistributed. And she realized, well, wow, if I don't have the portfolio that I used to have, it's going to be so easy for them to push me out. And so I said, wow, this is really ageism, and I want to know more about it. So I started to do research on the topic and found out that it's a lot more prevalent than anybody realizes. And it is kind of under the radar. And of course, when I did interview women who came forward and were willing to talk to me, their experiences were horrible. The way that they were being treated and subjected to demeaning remarks. And these are women at the top of their game, for the most part, who had contributed so much for decades. And all of a sudden they were looked at as irrelevant. And that really got my back up.
Mhm.
And I wanted to write the book not only to put a spotlight on gendered ageism, because I don't think many people think about the consequences of it, but also to give women a voice and the tools to really deal with it in the workplace and in life.
So, but you said that they wanted to remain anonymous. Now, were these women who were working in companies so that they didn't want to lose their jobs, or was it also women, that maybe were self-employed or high profile, but they weren't willing to really call it out?
It was mostly women who were employed or who recently lost positions and had been pushed out, and were having a lot of trouble getting another position, because research does show that it's really difficult for women over 50 to get rehired.
Yeah, so go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
So while we're on that, what you must have advice for women over 50 for what they can do to be rehired. I know I get this question a lot too from older women who, how do I make myself more marketable?
Right. Though the primary focus of the book is how to stay marketable and keep your job.
Mhm.
And these are things that we need to do throughout our career, but we need to be more vigilant about it as we age. One of the best advice that I can give has to do with, it doesn't have to do with resumes and interview skills and things like that. I mean, all that is important, but it's mindset.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's really mindset. And in the book, I talk about, there are two different examples of women, both who lost their jobs. One who, she took some time to recover. She started running and losing weight, and she felt better about herself, etc. But she actually took some workspace,
Mhm.
in the city. She lived in New York, and would go there, and every day finding a job was her full-time job. And
Right.
she networked, and she had a positive attitude and a great work ethic and set of intentions. And
Mhm.
then I talk about another woman who was just so negative about it. She lost her job. She was an attorney. And any kind of suggestions that I made over the course of our conversation, she said, oh, no, that's not going to work. Oh, that's
Mhm.
not going to work. So I think that the primary thing, the starting point, is to put your head in the right place.
Yeah, to really tape over any either old messages you got or messages that you may have received that put you in this pace and say, other people don't know more about me and my ability than I know about myself. Is that what you're saying?
Right. And not to fall into the victim mentality,
Mhm.
not to fall into a trap of believing all the ageist assumptions
Mhm.
that we're not going to get the job, and we're too old to get rehired, and we're too old to compete.
Mhm.
It's those kinds of things that affect the way we communicate
Mhm.
um, and behave in probably very subtle ways.
Okay. You use the term gendered ageism. And when you were using it, when I first heard you use it, it was the first time I'd heard that phrase. Can you just talk a little bit more about what that really means?
Yeah, I actually refer to it as the double whammy.
Okay. Okay.
Why is it the double whammy? Because our whole careers, we've been dealing with gender bias. And you can't escape it. It's still there in the workplace now, and women are subjected to it every day. They lack the same sponsorship and opportunities. They're not paid equally. So gender bias, yes. But ageism happens as soon as women start to show visible signs of aging.
Mhm.
And there's research actually by Catalyst that shows that women face ageism, the effects of ageism, earlier than men, because of the emphasis that our society puts on women to look young and attractive.
Mhm.
So as soon as we show signs of aging, wrinkling, whatever, we are viewed as less competent,
Mhm.
invisible,
Right.
and not offering any kind of value to our organizations anymore. So it's the combination of the two because of our gender and because of ageism.
And that's the double whammy then.
Sure is.
And how is that different for men?
Men face ageism as well, but they do it later.
Mhm.
They do it later. And as men show signs of aging, they're not subjected to the types of remarks and the ageist assumptions necessarily that women are.
Mhm. Yeah, I know I shared with you this story, and I don't think it's in the book, that after I had cancer, my hair I had lost all my hair.
It is in the book.
Not the one about the client, but
Okay.
this is a different story. People have to read the book to get that story.
Yeah.
Um, I was on an airplane and my hair was growing back, and it was growing back white, which is the natural color. I mean, it is white as the white on the eyes of that cat on the bottom of the screen. And, all my friends said, "Oh, it looks lovely, just keep it like that." So I had it like that. And I was getting off an airplane, and I had been talking to a young man on the airplane. And as we got off, we continued talking. And one of those sky caps came up with like a cart that people get it. And he said, "Ma'am, would you like a ride?" And I said, "No." And the young man looked at me and he said, "Why did he ask you that?" And I said, "Because I looked like I needed a ride. That's why." Now, and this was probably 15 years ago, right? So yeah, people make those kinds of assumptions, and they're afraid to go up to men and do the same thing unless they're hunched over and they got a cane, right?
Exactly.
Basically. And yeah, but some of that is about looksism too. I mean,
Look, yes.
yeah, and men face that too. I think men face some of that too, but not like women. As you said, as women's looks change, right? Their credibility starts diminishing, and that's what makes it harder for us, I think.
Yeah, I mean, and that just like, how do our wrinkles possibly affect our value
Mhm.
and the experience and the wisdom that we bring to our organization?
Mhm. Exactly. And you talk about this in the book. You talk about plastic surgery, and you talk about, how you can go to the extremes and look plastic, or you could just look okay. Hey, look, I've done it myself, and I'm kind of happy, right? And that's what I tell people. It's really up to you what you want to do, but you have to look in the mirror. You can't do it for somebody else. And you say this in the book. You can't do it for somebody else. You do it for yourself.
But it's amazing, the interviews that I did do, how much pressure women felt to change their looks.
Mhm.
There's a woman who had eye lift surgery. She said, "You know what? That's an investment in my business." She was a commercial real estate broker. And she said, I'll be able to work now for another 10 years.
Right.
But she really felt that. Or the woman who worked in the fashion industry, she was 62,
Mhm.
and she would wake up in panic attacks that somebody was going to find out her age at work. And
Mhm.
she had Botox and filler, and felt that she would try to hold off
Mhm.
the pressure, the feeling that she was going to be irrelevant because she would look youthful. So those stories really hit me because I don't believe that men feel that kind of pressure.
Yeah, no, I don't think they do at all. They don't when they're younger either, right? I mean, you've seen the studies where they take a group of women, a group of men, and they ask them each to describe themselves. And the men describe themselves like Cary Grant, no matter what they look like, right? Or Brad Pitt. And the women describe themselves, as a little overweight, and I could do this, and so we describe ourselves in pejorative terms as well.
Yes, we do.
Um, you you kind of alluded to this in terms of remaining relevant. What about ambition and relevance? What did you learn about women's ambition as they age? Anything
Yeah,
there?
well, a couple of years ago, actually coinciding with my first book, I did a lot of research about women and ambition.
Mhm,
And I found that, no surprise, when women first enter the workforce, they self-identify as the most ambitious.
mhm,
Then, as they enter their 30s and 40s, maybe they're having a family, they're raising their family, the ambition kind of dies out, or maybe it's because they've been subjected to certain gender bias in the workplace. They start to feel the effects, it affects their confidence, etc. What's really interesting, Lois, is that as women hit 50, the ambition went really high
mm,
once again. Now, at 50, chances are our children are grown. We have more time to focus on ourselves and what we want in terms of a fulfilling life.
mhm,
But in terms of the workplace, if the workplace is marginalizing us at that age and women feel that they no longer have a fulfilling career, then you're going to see a lot of these women leave. They still have a lot of ambition and a lot to offer, and they're going to start their own business.
mhm, mhm.
And
And
we see that trend.
that's a warning sign to corporations, because when the amount of talent a woman has at 50 or 55 or even 60 walks out the door, that's a huge loss.
All that experience and talent goes with her.
Hmm. Exactly, exactly. Did you learn anything in your interviews that really surprised you?
I would say the extent of the ageist behavior in the workplace did surprise me.
Mhm,
When women told me that they were called out as being a dinosaur because they were wearing pantyhose, you
mhm.
know,
Yeah.
when they were chastised, oh, you remember that you were around with Abe Lincoln, right?
Mhm, mhm,
These kinds of things where what surprised me, Lois, was I didn't know how widespread it was
mhm, mhm,
and how demoralizing it was
mhm.
to go through this, to have these kinds of experiences, and to try to keep your job and stay confident. And
Mhm. Yeah, it's interesting because what you're describing is just as women reach their confidence, right? And their competence, because younger women who may be competent think that they can't do the job. And we see this all the time. You know,
yeah,
a job goes up for posting and a guy with no experience says, "Oh, I can learn that." And a woman says, "Well, I don't have the experience. I can't do it," right? But by the time you're 50, you've got a lot under your belt and you're willing to say, "I can do this." And at the same time, you've got the other pressure, that's the ageism that's pushing you down. So,
well, one thing that I talk about a lot in the book is that there are certain things in the workplace that we can't control, right? We can't control the bias. I think we need to bring awareness to it when we need to call it out.
mhm,
But the one thing we can control are the ageist assumptions that we have internalized, because those assumptions actually keep us small and hold us back. We don't even realize how they may sabotage us.
mhm,
So
mhm,
if we believe truly that we are too old to compete or too old to get a raise or a promotion, then we're not going to do what it takes to get the raise and the promotion. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. We're
mhm,
going to be afraid to raise our hand. We're not going to volunteer for special assignments. We're not going to be visible. We're going to hold ourselves back. So it's so damaging when we do that to ourselves. And I call on women in the book to challenge what your ageist beliefs are,
mhm.
because you can sabotage yourself that way.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Turning to maybe something a little brighter, How about joy?
Joy.
Yeah, how about joy? Did these women have any joy in their lives?
I have a chapter in the book called Choose Joy.
Mhm.
And to me, that is basically such a great way to live your life, because we do have a choice. We can choose to live really in misery, or we can choose to look for joy every day. And if we make it our intention to find joy, we'll see it, we will find it.
Mhm.
And some of the ways that we can find joy, for instance, is hanging out with our girlfriends.
Mhm.
You know, there's research that shows that if you hang out with your girlfriends, you actually live longer.
Yes, there
There's
is.
some research that shows that if you do that a couple of times a week, that's a real benefit.
Mhm.
So those kinds of things. I mean, for myself, here in Santa Barbara, I've got a group of 8 women. We get together every week and we dance outside, social distance.
Mhm.
But that gives us joy. And finding out really what kinds of things bring you joy and then making it your intention to do those things and incorporate it into your life will
Mhm.
make a huge difference.
Mhm. You know, that kind of goes along with, I haven't seen it lately, but I remember my mother used to have something that said, "When I am old, I will wear purple." Do you remember that? There was an old poem and it said, "I'll wear purple and I'll go out in the rain and I'll do all these things." And it was really about joy. And it was really about choosing joy. And I think you're absolutely right. I think we do choose joy. As a matter of fact, I just bought a cap the other day because I wear a cap when I walk my dog. And it said, "Today I choose joy."
Ah,
Because I think that it is so important that we create our reality. And that's essentially what you're saying. Yeah.
it is.
Bonnie, was there any story that really stands out in your mind as kind of different than the rest or above the rest or?
Hmm. There were a lot. I mean, the woman that I talked about in the fashion industry, shared with me that she would wake up at 3 o'clock every morning in panic attacks,
Hmm.
that people would find out her age. I think one story that really stood out was a woman who was working in retail, and she was in her early 50s, and she had a previous career, but now she really wanted to get into retail and got this job, wanted to become a manager. And everybody in the store, of course, was younger. And it was a chain of, which I won't mention. But anyway,
Hmm.
she was working really hard and they made it really hard for her. As a matter of fact, they
Hmm.
kept her in the back in the fitting rooms, wouldn't bring her out on the floor at all.
Hmm.
And then when she kept asking to be a manager and asking to be a manager, they said, no, no, you're not ready. You're not ready, until she finally was brought down into the basement by her 30-year-old manager, who said to her point blank, you're just too old. Don't you know you're too old for this job?
Hmm.
Well, she called the hotline. So this is somebody who took it upon herself to really report this. They gave her the manager job, but they made it impossible for her. They transferred her to a store where she had to commute 2 hours each way. They told her there was an older demographic there, but she ended up suing them,
Good
and they
for her.
settled in court. So that is one woman who really said enough is enough. And she said, I'm going to be the voice for women
Hmm.
to understand that they don't have to take this.
Hmm. Yeah. And like you, I'm always talking to women about the fact that they can be invisible or they can be invincible. And they can choose which one they want to be, right? And I'm
Yeah.
not saying everybody's going to go out and sue their employer, nor should everybody go out,
No.
because there's plenty of other ways that you can have recourse without having to do that. But I think at some point, I'm thinking, good for this woman. She didn't let herself be marginalized. And there are laws in place that protect women for these kinds of things, right?
Yeah, but they're not really strong and companies get around them. They'll say you're
Like this
down,
one.
yeah, you're we're downsizing, you don't fit in the budget anymore. I mean, there'll be a whole bunch of different reasons.
Sure, sure.
And sometimes it's hard to prove that
Mhm.
it's actually ageism.
And that happens to men too. I mean, I've recently
Yeah.
spoken with some men that happened. Is there any upside to aging?
Yeah, there is a lot. Um, First of all, I guess what's the choice, right? Um, when I talk about ageism as an ism, this is one ism, Lois, that everybody who is alive right now has in common, because hopefully, if we're lucky, we're all going to age.
Mhm.
And so this is one thing that we do have in common, and I think we should be aware of. But there was actually some research done about women's aging and the effect on their brain.
Mhm.
And the research showed that we may have some, over time, we may have some short-term memory loss, but actually there are stronger connections built between the hemispheres. So women's inductive reasoning improves with age,
Mhm.
and also our temperament.
Mhm.
And those two things are valuable things,
Oh, yeah.
in the workplace. So again, I think that the way we approach aging is really important, and we can say we're really afraid of it and we don't want to age, and do everything we can to um, try to disassociate ourselves with people our age or older.
Mhm.
But when we have a positive mindset about aging, and this was research that was done recently at Yale, we actually live 7.5 years longer.
Just with the mindset, huh?
And that people who have a positive mindset have less mental illness, obviously, and depression,
Mhm.
and um, incidence of early Alzheimer's as well.
Mhm.
So these are long studies that were done. And so obviously we can't totally control everything in our life, but we can control our mindset, and find that our mindset about aging
Mhm.
really affects the way we age.
Mhm. You know, what you're talking about, Bonnie, kind of reminds me of, I was trained in existential psychotherapy. So it was really all about, our lives are all about choice. And that's all that they're about. And if you read the work of Viktor Frankel, no relation to me, but he talks about, and when he was in a concentration camp, and the people who survived the camps, they had something to do in their lives. They had something to look forward to. It's like there was something unfinished that they had to live for. And I would imagine you found that as well in the women that you interviewed.
Yes, yes.
There's that feeling that
Many
they,
of them, they really they couldn't name it. In
Mhm.
some cases, it was just a feeling, that they had a lot more to contribute. It was that acknowledgement.
Mhm.
Um, but for whatever, their last chapter is going to be, they felt, pretty optimistic that they could live it,
Mhm.
they could live it. And, we faced a lot of uh, tragedy and things that happened to us in our lives,
Mhm.
um, that maybe it was a divorce, maybe we lost out on a promotion, maybe somebody we know was ill, or we lost a spouse. And those are things we really can't control, but we can control how we react to the life circumstances.
That's always our choice, right? Our response to whether it's good or bad, that's our existential choice in many ways. Um, is there, and just going back also for a minute to this whole notion of something yet to do, I know I've been threatening for years to retire, right?
Really?
Yeah, all for years I've been threatening. I'm actually, next week, I'll be 70 years old, and I'm not afraid to say that. And last year I had decided, at the beginning of last year, at the end of 2019, I decided this is going to be my last year working in my profession. Okay, doing keynote speeches and, consulting and coaching. This is going to be my last year. And the thing that was really holding me back was not knowing what the next thing would be. Right. And I think a lot of women are like that. Again, it's a part ambition, but it's also a part endowing your life with meaning. And then COVID hit. And it was like, I don't have a choice. Right. All my keynote, you had no keynotes to do for a while. You had no web, you had nothing to do for a while. Well, we were, especially in California, when we were on lockdown.
Yeah.
And so it kind of created the space to figure that out. And I think that's also important for women to give themselves that permission to do that. Did you have any women talk about that at all?
Yes. I think that what happens, similar to the experience you're talking about, your personal experiences, we get trapped in our comfort zone, and then we don't know what else, or we feel a little afraid to take a leap or a risk without having some kind of a strategic plan to do so. But recognizing that, well, I really do have the itch to try something new, and giving yourself permission to get out of your comfort zone is helpful.
Yeah. And also giving yourself permission to say, because this is what happened in COVID, there's nothing. There's nothing here. I'm not writing a book. I was wishing I was writing a book. I was looking for a book to write. I'm not doing any of these things. And the anxiety in that silence, right, can really be very illuminating, because you're left with just your thoughts. What do I really want? I'm not going to have to, someone's not going to call me and say, can you come next week to New York and do a keynote? That's not going to happen. So now I'm left with making my own choices as opposed to reacting. And I think that's important for women.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's certainly been a benefit of being in this lockdown and not traveling as much. And we're in front of the Zoom camera all day long.
Oh God, really, huh? All day long. I'm going to ask you this one last question, and then I'm going to ask people to type their questions into the chat box so that you can answer some questions for them. But the question I know I am often asked is, I want to write a book. What advice, right? How many times you get asked, I really want to write a book. What advice would you give to any woman who says, I think I have a book in me. I really want to write a book? What's your advice?
Do it. Absolutely. Absolutely do it. I remember when I first started coaching, and what do you do when you start your business? People say, oh, you need a website, right? So I had this website. At the time, my business was women's success coaching. And how do you fill that website? Well, people said, well, you need to write a blog. And I was like, a blog? Like, I mean, what am I going to write about that anybody really wants to know? And I remember that first blog I wrote, it was like, oh gosh, I have nothing to say. I have nothing to say. And then of course it became easier and easier. And eventually I found my voice. But if you have some passion, something in you that you really want to express, whether it's poetry or fiction or nonfiction, I mean, my thing is, what do you have to lose? What do you have to lose? I mean, you could write a book, you could put out book proposals, and yeah, maybe some of them will be rejected, but there's so many different avenues for getting your book out there now, with self-publishing and hybrid publishers. So that, I mean, you're pretty much guaranteed that if you really have that intention and that passion, you're going to get your book out there. And I say, go for it.
Yeah, you can really make it happen, can't you? Yeah, I tell people, do you know how many rejections I got for Nice Girls Don't Get the Corner Office? Go figure, right? All right, we've got some questions here, Bonnie. Let's start with Joyce asked, when is it appropriate to sue being laid off or fired due to ageism?
When is it appropriate?
to sue? When might it be appropriate to sue if you've been laid off because of ageism or fired because of ageism?
Well, I'm not sure that the time frame makes a difference as much as your ability to recount the circumstances, the specifics, and be able to document them. Because if you are going to sue, you're going to have some documentation, different situations, different conversations, whatever, to be able to prove your case.
Yes.
And
So document
that
everything.
question, I would definitely refer to an attorney. And I say that in my book too.
Mhm.
It's important to know your rights, but if you feel that you've been dismissed because of ageism, first thing you should do is talk to an attorney and get some really good advice on what to do.
Mhm. And you know, also only because early in my career I worked in equal employment opportunity, so I used to investigate these cases. There's some free things you could do. In California, you can go to the Department of Fair Employment and Housing, and it doesn't cost you anything, and you can file a claim. And sometimes that's helpful because when you file the claim, the company has to present its case. So they will present their case, and you don't lose your right to sue in court. So now you have their data as well as your own, or you can go to the EEOC. So
one of the things that I talk about in the book is really in the chapter about knowing your rights, it depends on where you live.
mhm,
So California and New York may be a little more liberal, maybe a little easier to file those types of cases than some other states. So it's really important to understand not only what the federal law is, but what the state requirements are.
and I always say there's safety in numbers. So that if this happened to you, do you know of any other women similar to your age that this has happened to, or even men? Because you often get more in a class action lawsuit, right? So that's another way to think about it. And again, I'm not particularly litigious personally, but it really makes me mad when I see people mistreated like this. So I'd like to see people take the bull by the horns.
Why I
Okay,
wrote the book.
yeah. Another question here. How can women show the value of their wisdom and experience in the workplace?
So there are a few different ways to do that. One thing that I talk about in the book is to know how to advocate for yourself and others. Another is certainly how to create what I call a visibility plan,
Mhm,
where when you are more visible, look for opportunities also to be more credible. So how can you be out there? How can you really be in front of key stakeholders? Certainly raising your hand in meetings.
mhm.
And I love the advice you did in Nice Girls Don't Cut the Corner Office. I mean, regardless, be like, the fourth person at something to raise your hand. Don't be afraid to offer your opinions.
Early
And
and often.
to do different things like get involved in women's leadership initiatives or affinity groups. Talk about how to start maybe a cross-generational networking program in your business, or lunch and learns. Maybe you even want to set up a lunch and learn where you bring in different speakers and you're the one who um, gets to organize these things, and therefore you're looked on as being more credible and visible.
Absolutely. Lisa said something. Lisa, I think this is maybe you're saying this was the title of the poem that I had mentioned about the When I'm Old, I'll Wear Purple. And I think she said it's called Warning by Jenny Joseph. So we all need to look up this poem, Warning by Jenny Joseph. Thank you, Lisa. Susan said, in my experience, women managers were the most biased regarding age. I was told by my female VP that people in their 50s have no value and offer the same old thing. She asked me how old I was and squealed with joy that she was 2 years younger than me, and I was 57. She then told me I couldn't hire anyone in their 50s, but I had to hire someone younger. Ironically, last year, a new male CMO came in and the climate dramatically changed. Are women our own worst enemies?
I had a Zoom launch party this morning, and a similar question came up about women supporting other women. I'm not sure that there's any studies, and Lois, I don't know if you know of any that shows that women are necessarily more ageist towards their coworkers than men.
Mhm.
But certainly there is an issue with women not being that supportive
Mhm.
of other women. And I've heard all kinds of theories like, oh, there's scarcity of leadership positions and we're really competitive. I don't know if you've heard other reasons, but it is a real problem.
Well, it's interesting because I have a whole different take on it. And because I get asked this question a lot, aren't women each other's own worst enemies? And I say, you know what? If a man said the exact same thing to you as this woman VP said, you wouldn't like it at all, but you wouldn't attach, and that's because he's a man, to it, right? That we expect more from other women. We expect them to treat us differently, with more respect, be kinder. We have such expectations for women. And when women don't meet those expectations, it creates like a cognitive dissonance. It doesn't match up with what I think. And so that's what makes it so impactful. Because the fact is that I've had really bad women managers in my life. And I've had just as many really bad male managers, but I never chalked it up to it's because she was a woman. I just chalked it up to she was a really bad manager. And so, Susan, maybe it's just that she was a bad manager. But I think it's that dissonance that happens for us. Okay, we still have a couple more here. This one I think is probably for both of us. This person said, I love that Lois brought up Viktor Frankel and finding a purpose-filled life. I feel continuing to challenge ourselves and learn new things keeps us young and optimistic. What are ways for people in ruts to get started? What do you recommend to them, Bonnie, to get out if they're found themselves in an ageist rut? How do they get out of it?
How to get out of it in terms of learning new skills. One of the questions that I like to ask myself at the end of the day is, what's one new thing that you learned today? Because when you ask yourself that, then, and you're going to ask yourself that every day, you're looking for new ways to grow and new things to learn. And keeping that growth mindset is really, really important, especially in the workplace. So here's where we really need to be proactive, right? We need to stay up at the top of our game and make sure that we have all the skills we need to stay marketable and maintain our status in the workplace. And that could be improving skills that we have or learning new ones. Not waiting until somebody says, oh, you don't know Excel, so you're out of here. Somebody actually told me that story in the book. So it's important to really keep curious, stay curious, and be open to new experiences and learning new things.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. And I guess just thinking about my own path, I would say, I think it's also important to, if you find yourself in a rut, to think about your values, right? Am I living my values? If I'm in a rut, I'm not living my values. That's for sure. So are my values helping other people? Is about learning things? Is about, whatever my values are, in what ways am I living not just a purpose-filled life, but a value-filled life, right? As you said, we hope we all have this problem, that we live long enough that we're going to have this problem that we have to figure out what we want to do with our lives. And so really think about your values too. And the other thing I add to that is exercise. You know,
Yeah.
I think you get the endorphins going, you get out of that rut.
I mean, if I don't go out and exercise first thing in the morning, I don't know how to start my day. And all my friends know that, like 6:45, 7 o'clock, I am out the door. But the other thing about exercise, not just about your body, right? It also improves the
Yeah.
growth of your brain cells.
Yeah, absolutely. And the only other thing I would add to that is find a friend to get out of the rut with. You know, just talk to a friend about it, or get yourself a coach, or, you know, someone who's going to help you along the path. You don't have to do it alone. Beverly said, what advice can you give to 45-year-old professional woman to prepare for gender ageism?
To be aware that it exists, and to be proactive about doing what you need to do to stay marketable in your current position. But when I say be proactive, that's to avoid being blindsided by it. Because I think we believe in so much that our work is going to speak for itself. And there's a certain point at which now we're viewed through a different lens. We're viewed as an older woman, you know, and things change. The way we're measured is different. So I think the most important thing is to be aware of the issue, and to make sure that you really stay at the top of your game and do what you need to do to be visible and credible.
You know, Bonnie, one of the things I say in one of my books is, if there's something about yourself that makes you feel uncomfortable or lose confidence, change it. I don't care if you have to have it cut, colored, snipped, lifted. I don't care what you have to do. Just do it. And to give yourself the confidence, not for anybody else. Britt said, great job tonight. Can you comment on women as leaders and our responsibility to change these dynamics in our own organizations?
I think what we have seen this past year is women leaders really stepping up. You know, if you look at the countries that have really managed this COVID crisis well, you will see that they have female leadership. And it's a great acknowledgement to the fact that our feminine style of leadership, our ability to really step up and own our authentic leadership and style, to lead in a powerful way, has really been showcased this year. I mean, there's just such a difference if you look at the management of the pandemic. And I think we really need to acknowledge that female leadership is not only good for, you know, for the world, but it's good for our businesses. Certainly, we see the research that says that more women, more diversity of thought, the better our businesses are.
Okay. Why do you think, oh no, wait a minute, this one first. Do working women in their 50s, 60s, and 70s help other women of the same age by hiring them or recommending them for jobs and projects?
They certainly should. That comes under the category of women helping women.
Yeah, they should. And the question is, do they? Not always, because, you know, again, some of the research shows when women promote other women, they are judged more harshly than if they don't. And so they've got that backlash against them too. And so I think it depends on the woman. But I love Madeleine Albright's saying about there's a special place in hell. Yeah, for women who don't support other women. And so, you know, I don't think I could say that most women support other women, but I think we are seeing a change in that.
I think we are. I definitely think we are. When I first started my career, there was very little of that advocacy for others.
You know, there was the queen bee syndrome.
Yeah.
There was only room for one queen in the hive. And I remember I worked at ARCO, and I remember there was one female executive. I think she lived in Santa Barbara, as a matter of fact. And she did nothing to help. She'll remain nameless. She did nothing to help other women. And when you're the only one, you know, all eyes are on you. She probably had all kinds of reasons, but none of them were good enough for me. Why do you think women who seem to make up most HR positions don't actively do more to protect other women from these issues in their roles?
So HR, this is like, this is sometimes a challenging topic to talk about. We look to HR certainly for support. And I think we also need to realize that they're not just the advocate for the employees, they're also the advocate for the employer. And sometimes they're in a tough position where they are in the middle. But I think it's important that you do try to go to HR and you talk about the issues and document all of your conversations with HR that you're having, and seek their help in these issues. But I'm saying there's sometimes we don't get that type of support we expect, to your earlier point, because there's a conflict there. They report to, they have two bosses in a way.
Yeah, they have to serve two masters for sure. We have one more question, and we are at the end of our time. Lisa asked, what if you're just tired and you want to keep growing, but still step back a bit? Boy, Lisa, do I know what that feels like.
So, I just finished this 3-part webinar with Aviva Wittenberg-Cox about midlife rethink. And there were some women who said at the point, and most of these women were European, not even American. But of course, we all have in common this pandemic. And the sentiment came up about just being so tired and how that influences the way we're thinking about our careers now, about our lives now. It's really hard to kind of jump out of that and put more energy into what that future is going to look like when we're just so tired of this pandemic and so hopeful that we're going to see a light at the end of the tunnel at some point. So, I think that may have something to do with the overall feeling that you are tired, and probably the necessity to think more about what could that dream, what could that future be, and start to put energy in that.
I had a friend who one time said, it's never too late to rewrite your script.
That's right.
And
Rewrite the story.
Never forgot that. I got my book here. I hope that you're going to get your books, those of you who are on the line with us. Thank you for joining us. And I'm going to turn it back over to Michael at Chaucer's.
Bonnie and Lois, that was a wonderful talk. It was very dynamic, and we appreciate you both coming on. I wish you both the best. And please, everybody, go to chaucersbooks.com and buy Bonnie's book. Thank you, everyone, and have a nice evening. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you, Michael.